your mark, ready, set, let's go.
Yeah, baby.
On your mark, ready, set, let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to swing, baby. Yeah.
Getting jiggy with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's freedom, baby. Yeah.
Getting jiggy with it.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Getting jiggy with it.
Smashing, baby.
Count of three. I want everybody the place to be. To make some noise if you're down with me. 1, 2, 3.
Rock your body. What?
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
Especially for systems.
Released by Nintendo in 1983, it was meant as a home computer built on a modified version of the MOS technology 6502, and we also got the first major system to use it, well, decades or so. To close out the
those Easter eggs and all those Atari games, I felt like a little kid this past week, like getting ready to go to camp. Alamogordo and the Atari graveyard. For me, it's like holy ground, and that was when I realized my DeLorean.
Your E.T. running away.
Watch it, Yar. He has a lethal drone. It's revenge. Yar's revenge. This could be fun. This could be a lot of fun. Get him? Beautiful. Watch it. Galactic map. Okay. Sector 11. Hyperspace.
Biggest games and aggressive marketing. Its sales performance was stellar. Atari couldn't manufacture enough cartridges. Worse still, with no control over cartridge, brand was liquidated. Coleco and Magnavox and ZX Spectrum. For those arrived in the USA and defined the next.
The printer is printing.
We're really showing it to show what's wrong with it. One of the advantages of coming to a show is you can get...
It sort of fit the bill.
So the experts seem happy with the design, but will they buy? Imagine's plan for a Christmas winner is based on a radically different product, the Mega Game, struggling with an animation problem.
It's functioning.
And the company must gamble a huge sum on producing the hardware add-on.
The investment we have to make is...
counterfeiting, or even schoolboy copying. And how do you recognize the genuine from the fake? Or know?
By December, the verdict is in, and the courts allow Activision to make the games. 4 months later, Atari agrees to pay $25 million for the rights to produce a video game based on the hit movie E.T.
Nintendo reinvented the world. Nintendo.
Space Invaders and Pac-Man would continue to expand the popularity of video games. But with arcades, a third-party game company, Activision realized that it could make games for the Atari 2600 and was released first, and ended up becoming Atari's biggest hit ever, selling a whopping 7 million copies.
Of the Nintendo Entertainment System. When you master Rob. And for learning fun from the electric company.
Now this...
Be Atari.
Based on movie tie-ins. And much like Pac-Man, companies like Kool-Aid make games like the Kool-Aid Man. Even Purina, makers of dog and cat food, made a game like Chase the Chuck Wagon about, yep, dogs eating food. Man, I hate...
There was just nothing right in it. Yeah.
With E.T. than there were Atari 2600s in existence. Not a good idea.
Having already...
Early rock and roll, really. Enough people started coming and enough companies started making games.
Were predicting record profits for the video game industry. The bottom had dropped out.
Video games in them is possible. Too many different video games being sold. Too many games. people will get bored of movies with video game premises. But sometimes, being too greedy will come back and bite you. If there are too many new video game consoles, which are too much like the ones they're supposed to replace. Too many stores.
Licensing Space Invaders from Taito in 1980. It flew to the top of every kid's Christmas wish list.
They started selling their own cartridges, which were pretty good. And that became the end of the monopoly that Atari
dropped off sharply. Somehow, Atari products...
1983 was the year of the great crash.
Oversaturation and changing...
In the end, the lack of quality games for the 2600 and the influx of
financial calculations and record keeping, end quote. He had a point. Oddly enough, back to the Vectrex, the system used colored sheets that could be overlaid.
Though they were the smaller brand, to Nintendo, Atari probably didn't appear to have a lot of obligation, that Mr. Yamauchi was growing impatient with the negotiations, and 1983 was now in full swing, and Atari could no longer afford to.
Would have had to be involved. There were lots of factors at play. What kicked off the whole fiasco required to accept the returns. For example, this was killing a magic. The more that retailers overordered it, the more financial damage it caused the publisher. It's true that there was a total lack of control over third parties. Anyone who could shovel games onto a console did, especially for
Activision, Atari's best programmers left in droves, fed up with low pay and no recognition. And then, on top of the talent vacuum, to get the rights to E.T., Atari paid Spielberg $25 million up front. Then on top of that, Atari ordered $5 million for his work, because credits weren't allowed. Atari wanted Atari to be the only creator associated with any work. Individuals were merely
rewarding players with real-world prizes. Players who mailed in a picture of a high score from an Activision game were mailed an embroidered patch. Players with this... What is that even? Video games were no different. Video games were popular, and they were new, and not everyone understood them very well.
Just to get the Pac-Man version for their console. A lot of people actually returned their copy. Cement was poured on top of them. Not the best publicity for video games. They even released a Rubik...
Atari was so confident with their game, they made more games than there were consoles, hoping consumers would buy an Atari just and market it. It was a disaster. I mean, the programmers hated it. Nobody liked the game. The Shack Color computer were all technologically superior to consoles and were competitively priced as well.
Cash in on the bubble. Retailers bought all the video games they could handle and suddenly found themselves with boxes upon boxes.
Eventually slowed down, and Atari had to deal with the profit loss that came with over 5 million unsold copies. In 1979, several programmers left Atari and created Activision, which became the very first third-party developer. Many other companies soon followed suit, and soon lots of developers and publishers were from third-party developers. This meant that consumers had a lot of choice, but not enough information, and a lot of people ended up not buying any consoles at all.
To know where to start.
As you know, that created some controversy, but this was one of the first home games.
But due to poor sales of the 5200, they decided, let's put it on the 2600.
Up in clearance bins across the country, the overall value of video games just kept falling. And
Wikipedia article, quote, revenues that had peaked at around $3.2 billion in 1983 fell to around $100 million by 1985. A drop
known as the video game crash of 1983. Our story begins in 1982. Business for Atari is booming with yet another problem that led to the dreaded video game crash: an overblown market. An overflow of consoles and games being shoved on the shelves constantly. Oh, that's the romanticized version of it. Let's look at the game itself. Is it bad? Yes. The worst ever? No way. It's frustrating.
Nhất là 200 người. Giống phim này đã phát hiện được đến vài ngàn điểm.
This was just the start of how the video game crash of 1983 began. that said, you have 6 weeks to program a game for a movie tie-in. E.T., the movie that was so major, the game that was so terrible, failed quality control, and then causes more and more games to be produced for a console that were not only clones, but crap, with massive amounts for each game. And what do you get in the end is a massive amount of people questioning why they even bothered spending their money in the first place.
But it was the unprecedented success of Pong, along with its eventual 1975 home version, that many regard as what officially launched the game industry. Unsurprisingly, the game's success came to a screeching halt, and it's estimated that around 3.5 million of the 4 million copies produced were sent. 0.5 million unsold copies of the game buried in a New Mexico landfill, which in turn left retailers unable to return excess inventory, forcing them to slash prices left and right, creating an even more damaging effect on the game. In sales is placed over quality, and was simply a byproduct of the growing trends leading to the gaming industry's inevitable collapse.
On your mark, ready, set, let's go.
Yeah, baby.
On your mark, ready, set, let's go. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to swing, baby. Yeah.
Get it, with it.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's freedom, baby.